If you're to say something like feminism has ruined the West, it will make some people very upset. They will say, what about all the cases of domestic abuse? What about people who are raised in very cruel and extremely strict religious households? What about the sexual abuse cases? And those, of course, are all very valid points. As a society, we should certainly work to remove all forms of unjust evils. Yet that doesn't mean I think feminism is any sort of answer. And that's because feminism has essentially taken these instances and then ascribed them all to an overarching system of oppression, such as patriarchy or white Western culture. That is a classic example of making the cure worse than the disease. That's only exacerbated the issues I mentioned at the top of the video, as well as creating many more. Yet it's this ideology which is combined with the self-centered, status-obsessed view from modernity and created a world where women have to be empowered, where they must be girl bosses, where they must compete and ultimately beat men. Now, when they're called out on this, you'll often hear them say something like, feminism's about men too. But it's not about men. We know that because when you look at all the horrible jobs that nobody wants to do in society, they're all pretty much exclusively done by men. I mean, just look on your screen now. This fella has squeezed into a drain he barely fits in to clean it out as flying cockroaches fly around his neck and his head and his face. Now, do you think there's any calls from The Guardian and the BBC for women to do 50% of these roles? Funnily enough, they never talk about it, but there are men who do these sorts of jobs on a daily basis for quite meagre pay. And society never says, you know what, thanks mate, that was a really hard job and no one else wants to do it, so good work, thank you. And then we have to pretend that the absolute armies of young women entering the corporate world are somehow terribly oppressed, even though there are studies saying they're now out-earning young men. Now just compare this young lady's experience of work with the fellow who was spraying the drain clean while cockroaches flew around him.
Welcome to another day in the life working for LinkedIn Chicago. Get excited guys, because today LinkedIn hosted its second music festival. This was a hybrid experience, so each office had their own in-person experiences, but everyone could also stream virtually. So I got to the office, picked up my usual breakfast. There was a long line for coffee, so I had to get some nitro cold brew. And literally sprinted to a meeting that I was late for with one of the interns, and had to try out our special drink of the day, which was like a blackberry fizz. Headed to lunch, and this is where the festivities began. We had essentially a mini taste of Chicago.
Now, I'm going to cut the audio there because this lady goes on for about another 5 minutes about how she's got cakes that are designed with the pride flag on, how they're having dance competitions, and she has the odd Zoom call every now and again. There's a reason modern corporations are like this and go along with the feminist and woke ideologies. That's because they need as many people as possible to staff their operations, while the government can now claim twice the tax income they would have gotten prior. Yet the broader considerations about the health of society, about birth rates collapsing, is irrelevant to corporations and governments because all they care about is keeping things moving as they are. This is also why they try and distract these youngsters from the dawning realization that they're going to devote their life to a corporation rather than a society and a family. But that dark side is starting to shine through. This is what I was talking about in a video a week or two ago about how the dating market is a total mess in modern Western cities. There were lots of young men commenting underneath that video that they've totally experienced this. I'll link that video below if you want to watch that. Another terrible result of feminism has been the horrification of women. Despite it being under the banner of sexual freedom, you see young women now having up to 100 partners by the time they're 25, and an absolute plethora of online, well, what are basically prostitutes, making statements like this as if it's the most natural thing in the world.
What's the maximum amount of people you've bonked in one day?
22. That was at spring break.
Wow. Okay.
That was a sore night, to be
I was
honest.
gonna say, that's exhausting.
So can you talk us through that? Like, what happened? How was that set up?
Yeah, so I basically shared my hotel room online.
Yeah.
So I was like, look, this is the room I'm staying in. Like, just come and queue up. And I'll see as many of you as possible, like, whilst I'm here. Because when I went to spring break, loads of guys was like, oh, I've messaged you to film with you, and I couldn't get through, like, all of the messages. Like,
Yeah.
And I've said before, like, I've only got so many holes and so much time. Like, I physically could not film with everyone I wanted to.
Now, despite getting a lot of ire in society, it wasn't conservative traditional men who wanted this for women. This is the result of liberalism and feminism. Speaking as one of those toxic men, I'd much rather see this young lady in a healthy, happy relationship rather than selling herself and thinking it's some form of empowerment. But like a lot of young people, she's never been warned about the consequences of that sort of behaviour on herself, her future partner, her future children potentially, and society at large. That's because many of them have been brainwashed into the cultural Marxism of our age that tells them that white, straight Christian men are the epitome of evil, and anybody that's not that is automatically good, no matter what they do. This is why, despite it seeming like it should be the absolute central cause of modern feminism, Islam always gets a free pass.
I'm going to be asking the most difficult would you rather question out there. Would you rather have women's rights or Islam? Let's see how they react. Women's rights or Islam?
I'm not. Is that a real choice? Is that a real question?
That's ridiculous. No.
Why is it ridiculous? I think it's a very serious
It's genuine. There's only two options.
Have women's rights or Islam? What?
Why is that even a question?
Why are you at this rally asking that question? Provoking an argument, which there's no point. Why can't we just band together about feminism instead of you coming along here and starting a religious debate?
Because some people believe you should be stoned for the crime of being raped, and if you are protesting rape, you should be protesting the people that want to hurt you for being raped as well.
Why are you just letting this go past? Why are you doing this?
No, she's doing this with you.
Have you read the Quran?
Go away. I've read passages and there's a lot more violence in the Bible, and believe me, I grew up Catholic.
That's why you see Christians running people over in the streets of London, right?
Oh my fuck.
I think that people who say that have probably not actually read the Quran and have just been told that by the media and sucked it in. And I think we should listen to Muslim women instead of white women like me and you.
Of course, the irony is that it's these young women that have been told what to think by the media, as well as academia and the mainstream culture. They've been told their historic culture and homeland has no value. In fact, it's just evil. They've been told men are pretty much evil, especially white men. And they've been told the best way that they can fight against that is to be combative and competitive towards men. Henceforth, you can see the foundations of the social breakdown we're currently experiencing. And on top of that, men are increasingly dropping out of society. They play computer games, smoke weed, watch pornography. They don't really engage themselves because they don't see much point. In my mind, it's an absolute tragedy that our ancestors gave us such convenience in the modern world that we've forgotten the essentials of life. They've always been that any healthy civilization puts a lot of energy into the formation of young men. This is because if you get that right, you get a healthy, strong, competent, forward-thinking society. However, if you don't, you get one that's increasingly dysfunctional. This is where the famous adage comes from that hard times create strong men create good times create weak men, and weak men create hard times. Yet one of my pet peeves is when people start getting overly down and woe is me about all of this. That's extremely bad for our society, for us individually, and for our future. There is no doubt that we're entering or have entered hard times once more that look like they're going to get worse, but that means that men will have to rise once more, heal themselves, find out who they really are, and build a society that's actually healthy. Now, any future society will have to fall back on the older wisdom that men and women are meant to complement, not compete with one another. And I've also found in my own marriage, as well as speaking with other friends in their relationships, that many women are actually okay with those traditional dynamics, as long as the man is loving and open and listening. It seems to me that men and women are going to have to try and give each other a bit of leeway as we try to come back to some form of sense. If we don't, the birth rates will continue to tumble, society will continue to fall apart, and that's the Western story over. That's the magnitude of what we're talking about here. These are just my thoughts, however. Do let me know what you think down below, and do consider subscribing to the channel.